You're listening to the Shift Work Podcast, episode 41. I'm introducing you today to my secret weapon, the power of a single word that will make everything become possible for you in your life. And I'll show you how you can allow those things to exist simultaneously. Because it's not a matter of choosing A or B. It's a matter of choosing A and B. So stay tuned. Hi, I'm Luke Lehman, and you're listening to the only podcast for high-growth entrepreneurs rooted in business strategy and tactics as we discover the habits of high-performance leaders and dive deep into brain science. With over 2 decades leading high-performance teams, from fighter pilot to CEO, I'm excited to join you in your entrepreneurial journey. Shift the mindset needed to build your empire, keep more money in your pocket, and enjoy every day of the journey. Welcome to Shift Work. Hey, my friends. Welcome back to another episode of the Shift Work Podcast. I'm your host, Luke Lehman. It is a beautiful day for me to be joining you on the recording of this podcast, and I'm excited to share this message with you because I know today you are in the trenches, and I know that you are looking for the continued transition to becoming the better version of yourself. And this single word that I'm going to discuss with you today was the catalyst. When I could begin to understand the implications of this word in my life, I was able to create breakthroughs. And by all measures, health, wealth, relationships, I live a very beautiful life. There is a life full of abundance. But the changes that happened for me happened on the inside. The word of the day today is multiplicity. And on the way to multiplicity, we're going to discuss duality. I don't want you to think for a moment that I take aim at the public school system as a failure, because it's not. It serves its usefulness in getting you where you need to be. It got you where you are today. Now, for the majority of the folks that listen to this podcast, we had a very similar upbringing, either in the United States or in Western culture. We went through an education system that promoted us to go to college. It created a linear approach. This linear approach gave us a right or wrong solution. So again, I don't want you to hear from me that I'm taking aim at the public school system, because that's not true. And in fact, I have my kids in public school. In the 1st and 3rd grade, I am making the choice to put them in public schools because there is value to that. But from an entrepreneurial approach, the linear transition to problem solving is what gets us in the mess that we're in today. You see, what happens is we look for the right or the wrong because our brain has been conditioned to accept a 1 or a 0, a binary answer where only one thing can be true. If you fail a test, you do not pass the grade. If you get the problem wrong, you do not get the score that you desire. But that's not how life works. That's not how business works. And duality is the first concept that we must discuss, but we're going to move forward to what I call multiplicity. Duality simply is what I consider to be the measure of success in my life. It's where true peace, freedom, happiness all comes from. It's the ability to hold 2 opposing thoughts simultaneously in my head. I can be a good father, and I can yell. I can be a good business owner, and I can lose money today. I can be a great leader, teacher, coach, mentor, and people can be unhappy with me. You see, when we get curious, when we can hold those 2 things simultaneously in our head and to give space for each, to give credence to neither, to have no attachment to either one of those outcomes, we can create peace. So in a lot of what I do in my own life, in my own journey that I share with you on this weekly show, is I share with you how I live with intentional alignment. That's the balance of health, wealth, and relationships. It means that I do not have to pursue one absent the other. which is where multiplicity comes in. Multiplicity happens because I have an equal focus on health, wealth, and relationships. I can be a good business owner at the same time that I can be a good father, that I can be a good husband, that I can be a good friend, at the same time that I can be physically fit and I can focus on sustaining my life here on this planet. But when we take aim at school, it's the singular approach that you have to solve the problem this way. I recently commented on my social media channels that school gives you lessons so that you can take a test. But life gives you tests so that you can learn the lesson. So today we're going to look at what also can be true while you can have a bad day, but you also are a good leader. You can have a cheat meal while you also focus yourself on being the best version of yourself that you can be. So multiplicity is the word of the day. One of the biggest challenges in my life was the transition out of the Air Force. Once I left being a fighter pilot, I followed the natural transition of my peers into the airlines. Now, the airlines have an enormous amount of upside. As you become a captain, you can make about $300,000 a year to work about 14 days a month. You can live in domicile, which means that you can move yourself to the place that you're based and really just have an easy transition to work. You can spend most of your nights at home. You can schedule your trips so that you have layovers that happen at your house instead of at faraway places. It's quite nice. And I did it because it seemed like the next logical transition. You go to pilot training, you go to be a fighter pilot, you go to be an airline pilot, and then for the next 30 years of your life, you fly 14 days a month, you skip Christmas, you move Thanksgiving because you're going to fly the passengers that want to be where they need to be on that day. That was the linear approach. Go do this and then that. I created the challenge for myself at that point because I also had an entrepreneurial bite. I wanted to be an entrepreneur at the same time I wanted to be a pilot. Now, this is where the concept of the duality comes in. Can I do one without the other? Can I do one in concert with the other? Sure. Many people are airline pilots and real estate agents, airline pilots and real estate investors, airline pilots and stock investors, airline pilots and good dads, airline pilots and good husbands, airline pilots and run marathons. But the reason it didn't work out for me was not because the duality didn't exist at the macro level. It was because it was too finite and too rigid at the micro level. So what I'm encouraging you today is just to slow down and to make a decision for yourself about whether the duality exists. And we're going to move into the concept of multiplicity so that you can explore what can also be true for you while something else is true. As I closed the airline cockpit door, it was like a jail cell for me. For many people, it's the destination. It is the thing that they want to do. Powering up the engines, pushing back off of the gate. Now, there's a lot of exhilaration, and I do get a lot of questions about it because it is fun. And there's a lot of secrets about the airlines that you might observe from the front row of first class, and you see what's happening in the cockpit as the pilot pushes the bells and whistles as we sound the warning horns and check the aircraft, make it ready for takeoff, and you go back to what might be an early childhood inquiry or desire or opportunity or excitement about what being an airline pilot might be. We were exposed to that as children, and it seemed neat. And it is neat. Being a fighter pilot was neat. And compared to many other things that I could have done in my 20s and early 30s, being a fighter pilot was very cool. Being an airline pilot can be very cool, but what does it also mean? It also means nights away from your children. It also means skipping holidays and vacations, moving them around at the needs of the airline. In telling you that the duality did not exist, that I could not be an airline pilot and grow my business, we're going to take a look at my belief systems. And we're going to take a look today at what's true. Simply when we look at this, there is very little that's actually true in our lives. when I coach other high performers, I ask them, is it true? And is it true in all conditions? Is it true that you cannot be an airline pilot and grow a business? And almost in saying that, you're able to identify that as a limiting belief. You're able to see that, of course, you can grow a business because other people do it. Other people have done it. Other people have had construction businesses while also being an airline pilot. So the very first question is it true? And then the second question that I ask, is it true for me? What makes it true for me? If I believe that I cannot be an airline pilot and grow a business, what makes it true for me? Is it because I have a limitation of having a young child at home? Is it because there's too much time on the road? Is it because I don't have enough resources? What makes that statement true for me? And then finally, the third question is, what makes that statement true for me now? So at the micro level, it's very easy for me to be able to explain that when I closed the cockpit door, that I couldn't do anything else. My job was to focus on the safety of the passengers, to get the airplane from A to B, and I couldn't make sales calls. I couldn't work on my value proposition. I couldn't create a blue ocean for my business. I couldn't hire. So sure, in that immediate moment, it was true. And it was true for me, and it was true for me now. But as I zoom out just a little bit, is it also possible that I could have gone to a hotel room in Akron, Ohio, and then focused on my business? That also could be true. But perhaps my sales calls won't take my call at 9 o'clock at night, but maybe they will at 9 o'clock in the morning. By definition, we must take a look at the way that we perceive problems as whether they are empowering or limiting. Am I looking at a situation as if something is predetermined for me, that I am already on a path to greatness, or am I looking at it as if it's going to fail? So for me, the duality did not exist in the airlines, and I had to make a decision. And perhaps the decision for you may be to stop something. It may be to stop a marriage. It may be to stop a friendship. It may be to leave a business relationship because the duality cannot exist for you today. And that may be true for you. And that may be true for you right now. So asking yourself those three simple questions, is it true? Is it true for me? And is it true for me now? Creates the opportunity for you to be curious. So the airlines didn't work out for me, and I have no regrets about it. And frankly, it created the space necessary for me to be able to pursue and to dedicate the time and the energy into doing something that I wanted to do with myself, that I was passionate about. Every now and again, I get on an airplane and I think about how cool it would be to be able to fly again, to hop on the front of a 737, take off, fly, land. It's neat. There's some fun things about it. The duality can exist. But today I'm talking about things that are more micro in the scale, and how we get in our own mind about the limitations facing us, about what can become possible concurrently, what can exist simultaneously. Much of what I talk about in business is reflected in the way that I parent as well. I am constantly aware of when my ego gets in the way of my ability to parent or my ability to be a good spouse, because my ego is triggered. And the same thing that happens in my business happens in my personal life, which is why business is simply a reflection of you. When you can create the breakthroughs for yourself, you can then create the breakthroughs for your business. But business is only representative of everything that happens in your life. When you can begin to believe what can become possible for you, you simply open the doors for the greatness to happen. Now, I know oftentimes I feel like I'm a high-speed cheerleader, but it's because I do believe it. I believe that the negative emotions, I believe that the negative impacts that we have on our own lives, the way that we self-destruct ourselves, the way that our ego gets in our way, cause us to be limited in our own scope. When we tell ourselves the stories that things cannot exist simultaneously, that I cannot be a good father and yell at the same time, that I cannot be a good business owner and lose money today, lose the business deal, have the employee quit. I become myopic in my scope, and the stories that I tell impact the way that I lead, the way that I show up, the way that I focus, and frankly, what can become possible for me. So this concept of multiplicity has to exist for us. Multiplicity exists when you believe that things can be possible simultaneously. So asking yourself the questions that are simply, what can be possible for me? Can this be true? Is this true for me? And is this true for me now? Those are some powerful questions. But if I change the word just a little bit and I say, is this possible? Not is it true, but is it possible? And then is it possible for me? And is it possible for me now? Friends, we spend so much time on this podcast just slowing down. I just want you to be a little bit more inquisitive. Not that you don't already have that. I'm just trying to help you straighten it out for yourself, to realize that you don't have to forego one without the other. And this multiplicity happened for me in a selfie. You see, I bent down beside my I guess it was a kindergartner at the time, and I had just shaved my face, and I took the picture and I looked at it and I was disgusted with what I saw. I was fat, out of shape, unhealthy, overworked, stressed. I was showing up as the worst version of myself. And I was making excuses for myself because I was saying that it's because I was growing a business. It's because I was focused. It's because I was resolute and it was working. But it's because of this singular mindset. It's because school taught me that there was only one answer, ones or zeros, binary, right or wrong, that I believed that I had to grow a business and that you couldn't be in shape. But what if I asked the question, is it possible? Is it possible for me to grow a business and be in shape? Is it possible for me to grow a business and be in shape and be in healthy relationships? You see, that's where duality turns into multiplicity. Because multiple things can be true at the same time, which gets me into our first talking point about identity. We make the shifts in our life when we become the type of person that we want to become. And by simply accepting that multiplicity can exist, that you can have different versions of yourself. You see, I exist in the world as a father. My identity level is that of a father and a husband, a leader, a podcast host, a mentor, a teacher, a coach. There's dozens of ways that I exist in the world. And the multiplicity comes into play when I believe that I can have those things and they can exist simultaneously. And I win when they can become congruent, when one supports the other, when I can go for a long run and listen to a podcast episode that feeds my mind, when I can show up at the park with my child and listen in on a phone call that I don't have to actively participate in. You see, they can exist, and you are doing them right now in your own life. There are multiple places that your multiplicity exists. It's when you start shoulding on yourself that you begin to close the aperture of what can become possible for you. I should do this. I should do that. I should be in shape. I should be a better father. Yes, you should. I should be a more attentive wife. I should show up for my spouse. I should show up for my friends better. What can become possible for you? Is this possible for me? Yes. Of course it's possible, because you can look all around the world and you can find evidence of people that are doing the things that you want to do in your life that have already become the type of person that you want to become. So it's not a matter of whether or not it's possible. It's a matter of whether or not it's possible for you. And now we simply solve for what can become possible. How do we do that? We future pace ourselves to look forward to what type of person I need to become at the identity level. What would that type of person be? There was a transition in my life where I was formerly a fighter pilot, and then I was an airline pilot. There was a very marked moment when I had previously not been that type of person, and I now was. When did that happen? When did I believe that that could become possible for me? Was it when I submitted my applications to Delta Airlines? Was it when I showed up for training or in-doc? Was it when I got into the seat of the 737? When did I become the type of person at the identity level that believed that I could be that person? Arguably, it happened much, much, much earlier. You see, I began to behave like the type of person long before I ever sat in the seat. Long before I was ever a 737 pilot, I envisioned a life of what that would look like. And I began to solve for that. So this is not a imposter syndrome or a fake it till you make it kind of scenario. It's about beginning to identify as the type of person that you want to become. So if you want to become a leader that's also capable of running triathlons, that's also capable of showing up for your children, showing up for your spouse, being a leader, teacher, coach, and mentor, it can become possible simply by you saying it becomes possible. So is it possible? Yes. And is it possible for you? Well, now we have to begin to solve for that. Once you can identify as the type of person that you want to become, we can now solve for what types of behaviors and characteristics you need to obtain to become that type of person. What does that type of person do? And I use it often because what happens for business owners is that business owners forego one of the three of the trifecta of living with intentional alignment. You either focus on your health and the business suffers, or you focus on your relationships and your health suffers, or you focus on the business and the others suffer. What if multiplicity can exist and all three of those things can exist simultaneously? What if you can be a good leader and you can have a hard day? What if you can be a good leader and not have gotten enough rest last night, or not have had a good diet, or not have had the exercise that you needed? I am wildly aware that we are our own worst critics. And we say, well, this doesn't work for me. It's possible for someone else. It's just not possible for me. And that's where the stopping point happens. And that's because we are conditioned to have a linear approach. So I want to change our minds today. I want to redefine what can become possible. You see, I move a lot, left, right, up, and down as I change the way that I think about things. So I redefine what can become possible. Is it possible? Yes. Is it possible for me? Yes. Simply making the choice to say it's possible. It's not a matter of whether I have it or don't have it. It's a matter of whether or not I'm making the choice that it's possible for me. And then we begin to solve for, is it possible for me now? Do you see the distinctions? Is it true? Is it true for me? Is it true for me now? Is it possible? Is it possible for me? And is it possible for me now? Maybe the answer is no. Perhaps it's not possible for you now. But as you get clear about why it's not possible, you can begin to define what it would take to become possible for you now. And that's when we can get creative with our resources to say, sure, I believe that I'm on the right track. I'm not going to live in a scarcity mindset. I'm not going to live as if it won't work. You have so little anecdotal evidence about what will happen in the future. Unless you have been living a life of destitute failure, there is no reason for me to have any anecdotal evidence that what you're pursuing right now will fail. So why do we not start? I'm talking about very, very, very high performers that I work with on a daily, weekly, monthly basis that just don't believe it's possible for them. I don't really have the time. I don't really have the resources. We are all resource confined. We are all time constrained. We all have the same time in a day, 24 hours, 365 days. So when I look at what's true, when I say, is it true? And I begin to move left and right, was it true yesterday? Does it need to be true tomorrow? One of the things that I do often is I just zoom way out. We talk about what's true. So very little of what happens in life is actually true. One of my favorite restaurants is a place called Death and Taxes. It's the play on words that those are the two constants in life. But are they true? You see, there's a population that says that this is just only one incarnation of a greater existence, that your time on earth is only a part of your journey. So is it true? It's not true for everybody. When I stop and look, is it true? Are taxes true? And I don't actually know the answer to this question, but I do believe that if you live in Alaska, that they pay you a stipend to be an Alaska resident. Now, I don't know what their tax obligations are, but I do know that they get paid. What about corporations in America that are on the front pages and headlines that are saying that they're not paying their fair share of taxes? Or that Amazon's taxable bill was $0? Is it true? Is it true that death and taxes are true? And if it were true, does it matter? Does it limit us or does it empower us to be the next best version of ourselves? Does it empower us to live with multiplicity, that we can focus on health, wealth, and relationships and live with intentional alignment? Living with intentional alignment simply means that I am specific about where I focus my time and energy. On a micro scale, I do not always have time to record this podcast because oftentimes I want to sleep or eat. And yes, I desire a roof over my head. I also desire time to grow a business. I also desire time to connect with my wife. I also desire time to be available for my children. I also desire long morning runs. And I believe that it's true. And it's true for me, and it's true for me now, that multiplicity can exist. So how does it show up? It shows up when we should on ourselves. Because oftentimes we think that one cannot be true while the other exists. Why am I so open and honest about my own failures and shortcomings as a parent or a spouse? Because it's not a race of me against you. It's a race of me against me. It's me. Yes, I'm sharing it with you, but what I know is I am my own worst critic. So I simply have to choose that things can exist simultaneously, that I can be tired at the end of a day, that I can lose my patience with my children, that I can snap at my wife. But at the same time, I can also be a good human. I can also be a good leader. I can also be a mentor for others. If I were being critical about how many times I get it right, and some of it I can measure. Each morning I go in and I write what my top 3 priorities are for the day. And oftentimes I get 1 or 2 of the 3 that I set forth. If I can only get done 33% of the things that I set forth to do in a day, does that make me a failure? Or does it mean that I prioritized correctly and I focused on the highest and most urgent and most critical needs that I have? I just got to get out of my own way, and I got a feeling that you just have to get out of your own way as well. And in the concept of multiplicity, you can be a good father, you can be a good wife, you can be a good business leader, you can have it all. So how do we do it? There's really 4 places that I look to determine how I can make multiplicity exist in my life. And I'll tell you that just simply by adopting this component of possibility will absolutely change your life forever. Because you can never unhear this, and you can never go back to the linear approach that only one thing has to be true, that there has to be a right or wrong. It's just not true. I can hold these 2 concepts simultaneously. I can give credibility and credence to both, weighting neither, so that they can both exist simultaneously in my head. So what do I look for? The first thing that I look for is I look for where my ego is activated. And it's when conflict is happening for you, not when you're observing conflict and you can look on as the third party, but when you can be in the conflict. What comes up for you? What gets triggered? How do you respond? If anger is the emotion, what is the reason that anger happens? Is it because of chaos, disorder, lack, scarcity? Is it because someone discredited you, did not show you the value that you thought you deserved? So when I look for what happened in the ego, that's when I slow down. When I have a negative emotional response, I slow down. I just allow enough space to create the level of curiosity that I can now determine step 2. Is it true? And is what I am observing right now true for everyone at every time in all conditions? Because once I can determine the truthfulness of it, I can at least open my mind, my curiosity to what other truths could also exist. If I tell you right now that blood is red, you know right now that blood is only red when you apply oxygen to the outside of the skin, but inside your veins, because you can see them and you can look down at your forearm, you can see blue veins inside your arm. That the combination of the blood and the oxygen is what makes it red. But is it true? Is it always true? We know that blood is not always true, but what happens in an oxygen-deprived environment? What happens if I were to take someone to the moon and they were to cut themselves? Is it also blue? I don't know. I have no clue. I just need to be able to open my mind to what also can become possible for what's true. One of the things I struggle with is apologizing. Why? Because I am so specific with my word choice. Because I work so heavily on myself that I say what I mean. But in apologizing, one of the things that frustrates me the most is an empty apology without remorse and a reason to not do the thing in the future. So if the thing that caused you harm can be done in the future, then I don't want an apology. But because I am so specific about my word choice, I don't feel like I owe the apology. I said what I meant. But what else could be true? Perhaps I could have said it differently. Perhaps I could have used different words. Perhaps my apology is not saying, I'm sorry for what I said. It's, I'm present to the way that I made you feel. I accept my responsibility and my word choice. Left to do it over and again, I would have used less emotion. I would have used other words. And for that, I'm sorry. Is it true? And then step 3 is to simply determine what's possible. You know, as I sit here and talk about what my own failures are right now, what also can be true? What also can be possible? Is it possible to hold in my mind that, yes, Luke, you can be specific with your word choice. Yes, you can help others to understand your point of view, but also you can be kind. And when you come back and realize that you made a mistake, that you could have done it better, that you accept full responsibility and accountability for your actions. Could that also be true? Yes. Could it become possible? Yes. Could it be possible for me? Also, yes. And could it be possible for me now? Yes. I can be a good leader. I can be a good father. I can be a good husband. And I can apologize. Whatever stories that I told myself that held my reality together before do not have to be true forever. And it can be possible that I can get angry, that I can get sad, that I can show up as a version of myself that's something less than what I want to be. And realizing that it's only a race of me against me, that I need to do it a little bit better. So finally, once I've realized what my ego triggers are, I've determined what's truly truth in this situation, changed what can become possible for me, then I work on my identity. What does the type of person look like that's able to apologize, that's able to express emotions, show frustration, anxiety, stress, have bad days, but also be a good leader, also be physically fit, also be a loving husband? And when I can determine what that person looks like, I envision a future version of me that looks like that. How would I physically show up? What does that person look like? And I move it into the future. A 6 foot, 190-pound person standing inside a beautiful home, being frustrated, expressing emotions, and then coming back later to say, I didn't get that fully right. And I accept responsibility for my own actions and behaviors. Do you see how I can begin to change it? And things can exist in duality and, more importantly, in multiplicity, because even in duality means that only two things can exist. Multiplicity means that three or more things can exist simultaneously. And the chaos and the frustration and the disappointment in your life comes when there doesn't appear to be enough room for everything. Because the day is too constraining for you to be a good leader. Because there's not enough hours in the day for you to focus on your wealth and your health and your relationships, to live with intentional alignment. And I'm here to tell you it is possible. It is possible for you, and it is possible for you right now. There's only one thing left to do, is to simply make a choice. And for me, it's not a matter of choosing A or B. It's a matter of choosing A and B, that they can exist simultaneously, and that A and B and C and D can all be true together. And it doesn't mean that I'm doing it perfectly. It just means that I'm doing it better today than I did yesterday. So I encourage you to figure out what you can make a commitment to today to let the multiplicity happen. I know that there will be points of frustration for you. I know that there will be challenges. I know that you will be tired at the end of the day. I know that you will be hungry. Those things can all be true, and you can be on a journey to be the future best version of you. So if this episode has helped you in any way, if there's changes that you can make a commitment to make in your life today, I encourage you to reach out to me. Send me a message on the social media channels and tell me the changes that you're going to make today. Leave a comment below on wherever you're listening to this, and let that be your accountability mechanism so that you know that you can make the change to live with multiplicity. And if you believe that this episode can help someone else, I encourage you to share it with them, to help spread the message, to help leave behind a trail of better humans. I hope you have a great week, my friends, and I'll see you right back here for another episode of the Shift Work Podcast. Thanks for listening. If you found value in today's episode, please take the time to leave a review so that we can build our community of high-growth entrepreneurs. If you'd like to stay connected with me, go to www.lukelehman.com to find a link to your social media channel of choice.